Virginia, 1805. You're a young black man, chained to the tobacco fields, your back raw from the sun. A white woman approaches, smiling politely. But her smile is a threat. She touches your arm, then your shoulder. She whispers that no one will know. You freeze. Your body is no longer your own. You are both a laborer and a secret possession, watched, used, and exploited in silence. Introduction. Throughout American slavery, the stories of sexual violence often focus on black women, but enslaved black men were also targets, often erased from historical memory. White women, especially the daughters, wives, or mistresses of slave owners, sometimes exploited black male slaves in ways that were hidden, taboo, and systematically ignored. Power and control dictated every interaction. While laws and social norms punished black men for resisting sexual advances, white women faced little to no consequences. This created a system where desire, dominance, and fear intertwined, leaving young black men powerless to refuse. Enslaved men lived under dual oppression. Their labor was exploited in the fields, and their bodies were exploited in private spaces. Families, overseers, and entire plantations were complicit. Silence was mandatory, and betrayal was punished with violence. Understanding these hidden abuses exposes a part of slavery rarely discussed, a world where intimacy was coerced, survival depended on submission, and the most private horrors were the ones never recorded. In the shadowed corners of plantation houses, the rules of power were absolute. Young black men were constantly observed. Every gesture, every glance, every hesitation could be interpreted, controlled, or punished. White women, whether driven by desire, curiosity, or the assertion of social dominance, often exploited this. Resistance was dangerous. Laws and customs offered no protection. A young man who refused could face beatings, extra labor, or brutal punishment, while the woman wielding power remained untouchable. Even complicity, if he appeared willing, was coerced, a survival strategy in a system designed to strip away choice. The psychological toll was immense. These men were forced into a double consciousness, outwardly obedient, physically present, but internally navigating shame, fear, and the impossibility of consent. Families were powerless to intervene, and confidants were few. Trust could be deadly. Plantation records, letters, and slave narratives revealed glimpses of this hidden abuse. One young man recalled being summoned to the mistress's private chamber under the pretense of work, only to face harassment that could not be spoken of without risking death or retaliation. Across the South, these encounters were rarely recorded in official histories. They existed in whispered confessions, coded language, and the unspoken knowledge shared among the enslaved. The system transformed bodies into instruments of both labor and sexual control. The enslaved were commodities under law, property in private rooms, and their humanity was constantly violated in ways that history often refused to acknowledge. The effects of these abuses stretched far beyond the moment. Enslaved black men carried invisible scars, fear, shame, and the constant tension between survival and dignity. Many were trapped in impossible choices: resist and risk brutal punishment, comply and endure lifelong psychological torment. Sexual exploitation often intersected with labor exploitation. Plantation owners and their families wielded absolute authority, using both physical and sexual coercion as tools of control. Mistresses sometimes exploited black men to assert dominance over their households, to manipulate slaves, or even to rival their husband's authority. These acts, hidden from public record, were woven into the daily fabric of plantation life, leaving survivors with trauma and stories that could never be safely spoken. Narratives from enslaved men hint at the depth of this suffering. Some described being isolated in private rooms under false pretenses, enduring repeated advances, or being manipulated into acts they did not consent to. Unlike abuses of enslaved women, which were occasionally documented in court cases or letters, these experiences were almost entirely erased from history, leaving survivors voiceless. Even after emancipation, the legacy persisted. Men who survived slavery carried shame and secrecy, fearing that sharing their experiences would invite disbelief, ridicule, or judgment. Families sometimes remained unaware, and communities often silenced discussion of male vulnerability. The system did more than exploit bodies. It engineered secrecy, trauma, and erasure, leaving wounds that lasted generations. The story of enslaved black men exploited by white women is a history largely erased from the records, yet its consequences resonate across generations. These men endured not only the brutal labor of plantations but also covert sexual exploitation, leaving them trapped in a cycle of fear, shame, and enforced silence. Even after emancipation, the psychological weight remained. Many survivors carried secrets they could not share, fearing disbelief, ridicule, or social reprisal. Families and communities often knew little of these abuses, and mainstream histories systematically ignored male vulnerability. The cultural silence ensured that male experiences of sexual coercion remained invisible, even as the broader horrors of slavery were documented. This erasure has consequences today. Recognizing these hidden abuses challenges simplified narratives of slavery and forces us to confront the full spectrum of human suffering imposed by systemic power. It reminds us that exploitation was multidimensional. Men were not only forced to labor, they were coerced, humiliated, and denied bodily autonomy in ways often unacknowledged. Remembering these stories is not about shame or sensationalism. It is about honoring the humanity of those whose lives were stolen, their voices silenced, their suffering hidden. Their resilience and endurance are testament to survival under unimaginable oppression. By acknowledging the experiences of enslaved black men, we gain a fuller understanding of slavery's reach, its psychological machinery, and the lasting legacies of trauma, silence, and erased histories that continue to shape our society. The exploitation of enslaved black men by white women was not random. It was embedded in the structures of slavery itself. Plantations were microcosms of absolute hierarchy, where wealth, race, and gender intersected to create a web of control. White women were granted authority over the household, often extending into the bodies of those enslaved. This power was reinforced by laws and social norms. Black men accused of resisting sexual advances could be punished severely, sometimes even executed, while the white women involved faced little scrutiny. Plantation overseers often turned a blind eye, complicit either through fear, self-interest, or obedience to the patriarchal system. The private chambers of mistresses became spaces where social and sexual control converged. Orders were given under the guise of household management, clothing, grooming, or labor tasks, but could quickly shift to coercion. The enslaved were trained to obey all demands, and the lines between service, survival, and sexual exploitation blurred. Silence was both survival and expectation. Families of the enslaved often could not intervene, and even other enslaved people had to navigate the perilous balance between solidarity and safety. Testimonies reveal that these abuses were part of the unspoken hierarchy. The enslaved man's body, like his labor, was viewed as property, something that could be used, controlled, or manipulated to maintain power. The system left deep scars, not only on individuals, but on entire communities. Men carried trauma and secrecy, their stories erased or hidden, creating a legacy of psychological oppression that outlasted slavery itself. Even within the suffocating control of plantation life, enslaved black men found ways to resist, survive, and reclaim fragments of their humanity. Resistance was subtle: a defiant glance, a whispered joke, a carefully timed refusal, acts so small they often went unnoticed but preserved a sense of self. Some secretly documented their experiences in letters or coded messages, passing them to trusted allies. Others used music, poetry, and stories to maintain mental and emotional survival. Spiritual practice, prayer, and community rituals offered moments of solace and solidarity. Even when sexual exploitation and coercion seemed absolute, these acts of quiet defiance were lifelines, a way to assert identity in a system designed to erase it. Yet, the stakes were immense. Exposure could result in brutal punishment, loss of favor, or even death. The enslaved navigated an impossible balance: comply to survive, resist to remain human. Plantation life forced them into a constant negotiation of fear and autonomy, where even minor victories were acts of profound courage. This hidden resistance is rarely acknowledged in historical narratives. The stories that survive hint at intelligence, creativity, and endurance, proof that even in the most dehumanizing conditions, enslaved black men maintained a sense of agency. By exploring these moments of defiance, we honor not just the suffering, but the resilience and spirit of those whose bodies were controlled, but whose minds and hearts found ways to endure. Their courage, hidden from history, remains a testament to human dignity under oppression. Emancipation ended legal slavery, but it did not erase the trauma inflicted on enslaved black men. Many emerged from bondage without resources, social standing, or freedom over their own bodies. The psychological scars of sexual exploitation, coercion, and systemic oppression endured long after the chains were gone. The men who survived faced a world that rarely acknowledged their experiences. Communities often prioritized collective survival, leaving individual stories of abuse hidden or unspoken. Survivors carried shame and secrecy, and many were reluctant to share details with children or grandchildren, fearing stigma and disbelief. This silence created a hidden legacy of trauma, passed down across generations. Economic exploitation continued in new forms. Sharecropping, convict leasing, and other post-slavery systems ensured that black men remained vulnerable to abuse, control, and manipulation. The psychological imprint of slavery, fear, hypervigilance, and internalized oppression, affected relationships, family dynamics, and community trust. Yet resilience persisted. Men built families, communities, and cultural institutions while navigating the weight of historical trauma. Music, oral histories, and storytelling became tools to preserve memory, resist erasure, and assert humanity in a society that had long sought to deny it. Remembering this hidden dimension of slavery, the sexual exploitation of black men, allows us to understand the full scope of historical oppression. It also honors those whose strength, defiance, and survival shaped the foundation of future generations. Their stories, long silenced, demand recognition and remembrance.